Well, in 1987, I was over in Rome and with some priests, and on a Tuesday morning we said Mass, concelebrated Mass with Pope John Paul II in his private chapel, and I was able to stand right next to him. He was on my left shoulder, and I was on his right shoulder at his altar, concelebrating the Mass. That was that was an exciting, well, not exciting, but it was a memorable experience, to say the least. But then the other one was when my mother passed away. I was with her on the afternoon of my birthday, and she had been suffering Alzheimer's for about 8 years, and she was taking a nap. It was in the afternoon, and I was sitting next to her bed, and she was quietly, sleeping. And then after a while, I realized that she was no longer breathing. There was no jerking, no movement, no convulsion, no nothing. She just stopped breathing. And that was just an amazing experience. And I'm an only child, so I realized here I was, an older grown man, and I was now an orphan. I didn't have a home anymore because home was wherever mother was, but she was in a nursing home. But anyway, when she passed away, I realized that I was now alone, and that the woman that had given me life was now gone. And so that was a tremendously, emotional, moving moment in my life. But I've been asking God to take her for quite some time because her quality of life was pretty miserable. So anyway, on my birthday, January 6th, 2001, she passed away. And of course, then the other one is retiring, if you want to call it retiring, although before the Alzheimer's, or before the arthritis and the collapsed arches, I was very busy going around from parish to parish, helping out, but for the last year and a half, I've been unable to do that, and that's been hard because I want to be doing things, but being incapacitated has been very, very difficult to deal with. I served in 4 parishes, okay? Well, actually 5, but the first one was only 14 months. And that was in Port Huron, Michigan. The rest of them have been in and around Ann Arbor and Lansing, and essentially 4 parishes. I mean, this course of St. Mary's Student Parish at the University of Michigan was quite exciting, with all of the Cultural Revolution beginning, and the pot was coming in, and alternative marriages were coming in, and there were protests against the universities, and every major institution was open to question. The church, education, the economy, everything was. So that was unique unto itself. And then my next assignment was to create a parish out of nothing, literally out of nothing. And I had to find land, and I had to find people, and I had to build a parish. And so that had its own unique, set of challenges. But they were wonderful challenges because they brought up all my creative juices and my talents for starting things up, and the ability to do something brand new. That was very, very exciting, and I loved it. And then I went back to Ann Arbor to a big, huge parish with 2,800 families and 500 kids in the school, and it was a great, big parish. And I was there for 10 years, and then went out in the semi-retirement to a tiny little parish called St. Mary's in Manchester, and was there 5 years. and there were maybe about 300 or 400 families, and it was just a beautiful, wonderful, bucolic, experience. So it's difficult to compare them because each one was unique. I'd been writing columns and wrote one weekly. And well, anyway, Bishop Mengling called me in his office and said, I'd like you to be the editor of a newspaper that's owned by our diocese and has our own local content to it. And well, that was 1980, 1998, 1997, 1998. So I said, well, let me do a little investigating for you, and then I'll come back and we'll talk about this. And so I went out and I started looking at newspapers, church newspapers, and it became immediately evident to me that print media was starting to have difficult times, and that with the advent of electronic media and personal, internet stuff and all of that, I realized that newspapers didn't have much of a long life ahead of them. I mean, sure, they had a long life ahead of them, but they were in a state of decline. And besides, newspapers, all they do is publish facts, information, and data. And then, people wrap last night's garbage in it and throw it away. And that's what happens to your newspaper. And to start a newspaper, you'd have to have a staff of maybe 6 or 7, and it would cost you about $1,250,000 a year to have your newspaper. I said, and what you will transmit is facts, information, and data. And do you really want to spend over $1 million a year doing that? He said, no. He said, but what else can we do? And I said, well, I know this. I know a couple of guys at Mundelein Seminary that redid their magazine, Patrick O'Brien and Dwight Aesop and a couple of others. And I said, we can produce a magazine for you, 4-color, maybe 12 to 18 pages, and you'll transmit information, formation, and evangelization, and instead of facts, information, and data. And it'll cost you half of what a newspaper would cost. And so he finally agreed to, well, let's give it a try. So I went out and tried to drum up support for it. And first thing I did was call Patrick and had him come up to Manchester and offered him a job as the producer. The producer of a new magazine for the Diocese of Lansing. So then we started figuring out titles, and Patrick's genius began to show itself. And when that happened, I just sort of backed off and said, okay, I'll support you in any way I can, but this is your baby. So he gladly took it and took the challenge and saw the opportunity to change the way the church, at least the church in the Diocese of Lansing, change the way the church presents itself, and no longer rely on a newspaper, but rely on a classy, very well done, beautiful magazine that people won't throw away. They'll put it on their coffee table or whatever, and share it with their grandchildren and their neighbors, and it'll be a tool for evangelization. So that, in terms of evangelization, we were ahead of the game way back at 1999, 2000. And that's how it all began.